Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Johnny Hill and this is going to be a quick unboxing and first initial impressions of the new Tamron 150 to 500mm f5-6.7 for the Sony E Mount. So this arrived today from Tamron and I'm super excited to get into it and take a look. I've been waiting for this lens to be released for the Sony E Mount system because this is literally like the last lens that Tamron has to kind of bring out to complete their lineup pretty much. There's probably a few more primes that they could bring out, but they essentially have everything now from 17mm all the way to 500mm covered, which is just absolutely incredible. So this is a huge box. When I saw the package it came in, I was like, oh my goodness, how big is this lens? But obviously, you know, it's mirrorless, so the size is going to be able to be kept down quite significantly, which is awesome. Oh my goodness. It's a big lens. Now I wish I still had my Canon EF version, the 150 to 600, to kind of compare, because that's like your equivalent. If you're moving to mirrorless from like DSLR, this is obviously what you'd be going with if you had like a super telephoto lens. Okay, so looking at the lens, that's interesting. We have multiple vibration control modes, and then we have vibration control on or off, and then we have our focus range. So on the range, we have 15 meters to infinity, 3 meters to infinity, or full. So it's 3 ways. That's pretty cool. We also have a focus we also have a zoom lock. So if we lock it in place, it will not move from 150mm. And interestingly enough, I didn't know it had this, but it has a clutch mechanism to keep it in place. So you can go to multiple areas in the zoom range. So if we want to go to whatever this is, bring that forward, and it's locked it in place. That is a really nice design. And I could be wrong, but I don't think I've seen that on other super telephoto lenses. So that is a really nice addition, because you know, if you're out getting wildlife photos or compressed landscapes or something like that, and you want to stay, say, at 350, just lock it into place with the white line showing, and you know that you're not going to knock the lens and lose your focal length, which will obviously change your focus plane that you're on and potentially mess up your photograph. All right. Should we go put it to the test? Where would be the best place to take a telephoto lens? I'm in Utah. I could go up to the mountains, or I could go to the Tetons. Should we just go to the Tetons real quick? I think that's a good idea. So, I have with me what we were just talking about, 150 to 500, Tamron 150 to 500 and the Sony E Mount. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be getting some nice compressed photos of the Teton range. Now this lens would be a perfect wildlife lens. However, I'm not a wildlife photographer, so I don't think and didn't think it would be fair me talking about how great this lens is for wildlife photography. So the main reason why I got this is because, one, I want to get into wildlife photography for sure, but two, is so that I can get some beautiful compressed landscapes to help tell my story and really like draw the viewer into so much more detail, which is why I'm going to be showing how good this lens is for landscape photography. So I'm going to wait for the sun to dip down behind the peaks and we'll get right on into it. All right, everyone, we are back in the office now. We are done and dusted with that trip to Grand Teton National Park, and just gonna kind of wrap up this video talking about how I felt this lens, the 150 to 500mm by Tamron, how I felt that this lens performed for compressed landscape photography. So first off, I want to apologize that I didn't kind of cover like what I was doing at the time in terms of my composition and the settings that I was using. That was the first camping trip that I went on with my 2-month-old son and my wife. We had that planned and booked a long ways before he was born to kind of get him outside early on and get him used to camping at a young age. And I figured it would be a great opportunity to tie in with this lens kind of initial review. However, I just didn't really have the time to pour too much into that when I was there camping, because he obviously needed to be watched and I just wanted to spend time with my wife. But I did want to get some photos to show people how capable this lens is for compressed landscape photography. So I promise that I will do a more in-depth review after I've put this to use a lot more over the next few months, and kind of that's my goal as well, because I did a video, the last video I did, I got too caught up in the moment. And this is a learning process for me. I hope you understand that. So any feedback you have, I always appreciate. But I was caught up in the moment, kind of like with this video at Grand Teton National Park. And I just neglected to record as I was making those photos. And that's primarily what I want this to be. My number one goal is to teach and share my experiences and share my methods with people watching these videos. So I'll definitely make sure to do that next time. But we're gonna dive on into some of the photographs that I was able to make in Grand Teton National Park. So this first one was actually at sunrise, and it was facing the other direction from the Grand Teton range. And it was taken at, I think, about 200mm, f6.7, I think I just had it set to. And I really like this because just the way that the trees were kind of framing up the mountain in the background, and there was that soft, very nice soft touch of light in the background as well. It was a very nice selection of layers with the foreground and then the trees and then that hill and then the mountain. So I really liked that. I feel that the whole photograph kind of came together rather nicely. Now this next photograph I really liked. Now this one is actually 150mm and it is a panorama. Realistically about 50mm would have fit all of this in the frame, but I wanted this frame with those trees creating a nice framing on the sides, but I wanted the mountains behind to be a bit more compressed, which is why I used this lens to create that panorama. And I'm a big fan of doing compressed telephoto panoramas because one, they create compression in the photograph, and then two, they also allow the photograph to be really large. So you can either print it large or you can have it as a desktop background and things like that, and it just retains so much quality. This next one, I believe I was zoomed in all the way at 500mm on the Grand Teton itself. So the tallest peak on the Teton range, I believe, the most prominent one. And this just shows how incredibly sharp this lens is. So I haven't had the opportunity, and I didn't think at the time to test out different f-stops to find the sweet spot, because generally there is a sweet spot with these lenses, particularly as it's a super telephoto. But I was at 6.7, just the minimum, smallest or largest aperture for 500mm. But you know, if you look closely, you can see just it has all the detail on the snow and on the lights and shadows on the snow. And you got a little bit of the Teton Glacier there on the right hand side as well, which is really nice. And then the final two photographs were taken at sunset down at Schwabacher's Landing. The clouds were coming in and creating this incredible light show. We had just beautiful light in the left there, and then on the right hand side we had this glowing light. And you tend to get that kind of glow at sunset at the Grand Tetons because the sun is obviously dipping behind that mountain range, and if there's any sort of faint cloud or fog or smog in the air, then it will just pick up these light rays that are being cast off the backside of the mountain. So I really love telephoto landscape photography because, as I mentioned at the beginning, it draws in the viewer a little bit more to the photograph, and it creates a bit more depth to that image because it's an unrealistic focal point. You're not experiencing that in real life. You know, you have this kind of 35mm focal range that you're used to seeing with your own eyes. And when you're compressed in on this photograph, it really just shows the grand kind of magnitude of some of these landscapes, which is why I was super excited for this lens. Just to kind of wrap things up, I posted on my Instagram today for people to ask me some questions, some of my followers to ask me questions if they had anything they wanted to know about this lens. And there was one question in particular that stood out to me. That they asked if I had shot any wildlife with it, and I hadn't had the opportunity to do so. I did get, mainly because, as I had mentioned at the beginning, I don't do wildlife photography, so I'm a huge novice with wildlife photography. I don't know where to go. I know that I need to be kind of in the early hours of the morning or the late hours in the afternoon to get animals, interesting animals that is, and I just didn't have the time, with it being a family trip first and foremost, and the opportunity to do that. But I did, on a different outing, just kind of up one of the local canyons, test it out on it was a falcon, I think, flying around, and it was so incredibly fast locking on, paired with the A7 III that has a very good autofocus system, but the autofocus motor in this lens was incredibly fast. I had it on tracking, animal tracking, and it was picking up that bird at 500mm. The photos are awful because it was dark and I was at like 8000 ISO, so very grainy, and the quality wasn't that great because I was pushing that ISO, but the performance is going to be incredible if you have, you know, fast-paced tracking involved and things like that. So I have no doubts that this will be an excellent wildlife photography lens if you're okay with that 150 to 500mm focal range. Obviously, a lot of people do tend to go a little bit further than 500mm, and I do not know if Tamron will be coming out with a teleconverter or if there already is one available that will work with this. Maybe down the line we might see something like that. But all in all, I think this is a fantastic lens. I'll give it close to about 9 out of 10, covering image quality, performance, and build quality as well. It's built like a tank, but it's also not too heavy because it is built for mirrorless. So if you have any more questions about this lens, feel free to drop a comment down below. And if you like this video, feel free to thumbs up and subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you later.